schools, and licensed childcare centers. This includes the site in Kitchener that will be transitioning into a heart hub. By cleaning up our streets, we protect our families and make our communities a better place to live and work. Finally, I know that healthcare is always top of mind for many, and we all want to be able to access care closer to home. This summer, I joined the Premier to celebrate the site selection of Waterloo Region's new hospital. We've invested $5 million to support the early planning and construction of the new hospital that will expand services and add more beds to connect more people to convenient care closer to home. This is in addition to our investment to support the new cardiac catheterization lab at St. Mary's General Hospital and the new PET-CT scanner at Grand River Hospital that we just announced about a month ago. Across Ontario, we're investing an extra $1.8 billion to ensure everyone can connect to primary care over the next 4 years. Ladies and gentlemen, these 5 pillars, building Ontario's economy, protecting our workers, keeping us competitive, and cleaning up our streets and delivering better care form a comprehensive strategic plan to protect Ontario from the current economic threats from the U.S. while laying a foundation for a prosperous future. In a time where economic stability is under direct attack, we need a government that, with the mandate from the people to act and resolve and act decisively. Only Doug Ford and the Ontario PCs have that plan to protect Ontario. With that, I thank you, and looking forward to our fireside chat, Ian. Thank you very much.
Oh, they are on. I think they're on. Yes, they are. There we go. Yeah, you said we've known each other as adults, and I think we've known each other when you were still not an adult, I think is when we first met you. Yeah.
Some days I almost feel like I'm not still, but at least I try. I'm going to be 40 next week.
He's just a young pup.
I'm just a young pup, yes, sir.
So there's been conversation. We're in the middle of the campaign, about 3 weeks left, I think. Some have said that it's an unnecessary election. We don't need it. That it's opportunistic. I don't share that. I think one of the things that was very clear to the business community is the federal government was missing in action with the Prime Minister and all the internal Liberal Party machinations. And we were coming up against what has become obvious is the Trump threat and the threat of tariffs. So we in this election, you've touched on some of the things that are important to the Ontario PCs. On the local perspective, whether we talk about Vision 1 million and say there are things that we need to do if we're going to be successful as a community, as a million people, and it's all happening in the next 20 years. We need to build the new hospital you talked about. We need our LRT to be finished from Kitchener to Cambridge. We need to build something in the order of 70,000 new housing units of all descriptions, and a whole bunch more. So that's on the local perspective, but we need our provincial partners to do that. Skilled trades provincially, like there's a whole range of things that every community across the province needs leadership from the province on, and the federal government obviously leading Team Canada against the trade of threats and making sure that we're expanding our opportunities for trade to other markets and not be so dependent on the U.S. So I guess the question is, with all of those things on the go, how, when at post-election, do you tackle those? Because it's, as a government, there's a lot of things, and it's not, you can't pick and choose. You're going to have to address all of those issues.
Yeah, listen, I think that underscores exactly why we need that election right now. We need a strong 4-year mandate that will mirror what we have with the U.S. president right now. Obviously, he was sworn in, I think, about maybe three weeks ago at this point.
It just feels like forever.
I was joking earlier I was going to have to come and hold Ian back from speaking his mind, but I think we'll be okay. No, but in all seriousness, that question has come up at the door, and I think that is the answer. The answer is we need to make sure that we have a strong, stable Ontario government for the next 4 years that will be able to, I don't want to use the term go toe-to-toe with the U.S. administration, because at the end of the day, we should be friends. We want to be able to negotiate in good faith. We want to be able to make sure that everyone's putting their best foot forward. But I think we've seen Premier Ford over the last few weeks on U.S. News. I think everybody in the room's probably had a chance to see him on CNBC or CSNBC, on Fox News, on CNN, spreading that message of trying to work together. And it's important that with maybe a bit of a void with the federal government right now, I think they're trying their best given the current situation, that we do have a strong, stable government here in Ontario for the next 4 years with the mandate of the people to be able to go out and action the things that need to be done.
Of course, the U.S. will always be our biggest trading partner. The question is, can we be so reliant on them when they've proven themselves just in the last 3 weeks to be an unreliable partner? They're not even living up to their agreements under the United States Canada agreement. So I guess the question is, as we start thinking about this situation, this crisis, what's the Premier's view? What's your government's view on trying to tariff-proof our economy as much as possible? Because this has highlighted that we are too dependent on the United States, and that we've missed opportunities, and Ontario's part of that, of the federal government has not done comprehensive tax reform in 60 years. We still don't have free trade inside of Canada, so we have interprovincial trade barriers. There are a whole series of things that we know we don't build pipelines to get to Tidewater so we can get world prices for our commodities. Ontario's got a role to play in that, particularly in interprovincial trade barriers. What's the Premier's view and what's the government's view on making sure we do that heavy lifting now while we deal with the immediate crisis?
Yeah, and I think we're poised from an Ontario perspective, obviously being the leaders at the Council of Federation right now. The Premier is currently in Washington with the other premiers, showing that leadership. And one of the things that we'd actually started talking about, this is interesting, before all the tariff talk and everything was happening, especially within my ministry, which is the Ministry of Red Tape Reduction, is that interprovincial barriers and what we can do to try and make it easier for Canadian companies to deal with other Canadian companies, whether it's trucking, transportation. We've done some roundtables over the last little while where we've heard from folks who move, actually it's very interesting, they move heavy equipment and stamping presses that are used in the automotive industry and other applications from, say, Windsor to other parts of North America, and they have to file different route plans in each province, and there's different weight limits for the roads in each province and bridge heights, and you can only travel on certain roads that are designated. And this is even on the Trans-Canada Highway, right, where you're supposed to have sort of a national appeal, but each province handles everything differently. So I think there's a lot that has already, the wheels are in motion for a lot of it, but this is really just going to highlight that we need to do it even more. And I think our ministry, the Red Tape Ministry, will lead some of that in conjunction, obviously, with Minister Fedeli and Economic Development and Trade. And I think there's some good opportunities to be able to advance that forward.
So the Premier is the chair of the Council of the Federation, which is the leader of the premiers, and he's I think done a pretty good job, according to the other premiers, of getting them together, getting them on the same song sheet. But as it relates to interprovincial trade barriers, I mean, some would estimate somewhere between 3 to 5% bump in our GDP, which is thousands of jobs and billions of dollars of tax revenue or tax relief for business. But any which way you slice, it's a boost to our economy, which we are going to need in the face of the uncertainty, if not the tariffs. Certainly the uncertainty of tariffs is dampening the economy. But the Premier, I mean, they're having a framework with the other provinces to say we're going to get this done. We can't even get there. I think the Premier's indicated he thinks that can happen. And then the heavy lifting, maybe it's with ministries like yourself, but to bring, a lot of these aren't taxes inside of Canada, it's regulation. It's a different regulation, it's different certificates that are required for skilled trades, as an example. That is across ministries, it's across jurisdictions.
Yeah, and I think, the taxation piece is one thing, but the regulation piece is another. And I know what we look to do from our ministry with red tape reduction is be able to streamline those regulations. Look at ways that we can get rid of outdated regulations. Look at ways that we can sunset things that maybe were brought in. For example, one thing we've done is a lot of regulations that were brought in through the COVID pandemic that really don't apply anymore, but businesses were still having to comply with them. Be able to sunset those out so that you don't have to, do that redundancy, unnecessary things, right? So I think there's definitely going to be a lot. We've already started reaching out prior to the election to my ministerial counterparts, federally and through the different provinces, to start to build those relationships. And let's look at where we can find the low-hanging fruit. Let's see what some of the easy things are that we can just sort of check off, so that we're not going to continue down this road and perpetuate things any further than they need to be. And like I said, a lot of this work had already started, but now with the Trump administration and potential tariffs, and I think that the toughest thing is the goalposts keep moving, right, Ian? One day it's one thing, the next day it's the next. So we need to be able to become more reliant, more self-sufficient, and look at ways, like you said, whether it's through pipelines, interprovincial trade, looking at ways to find other national export markets that we can send our amazing natural resources to. We need to be able to explore all options.
Yesterday we had, I told you in our session just before we started, we had Flavio Volpe from the Auto Parts Manufacturers Association of Canada. We did a live recording of Business to Business at the Cambridge Chamber event. But one of the things that came up, and there was some machinist and tool and die folks that locally here, which I thought was interesting, and I'm interested in this, because the Premier's making the case that, rightfully so, that the United States does need us, and the auto sector is totally integrated. And if he puts tariffs on 25% of the auto sector, it's not. We won't just shut down. The entire North American auto sector will shut down. So that's a reality. But the machinist and tool and die folks said, hey, one of the things the president doesn't understand, I think the Premier does, is he's trying to get messages like this, which is even for a moment you acknowledge that supply chains in the auto space, the tier 2, tier 3 businesses that are all around Waterloo region, packed up and moved to the States. They have no skilled workers. They do not have the skilled workforce to do the jobs. Is it tough to try and get those messages into the president's head or his advisors? I mean, because that is, for business, is the most frustrating part is, even if he wants to do these things, there's no practical way to achieve them. In the meantime, it's affecting our businesses, it's affecting our communities, and frankly, you wonder why people are perplexed and pissed off. It's because it's existential for our communities and for our province.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've had a few briefings over the last little while as to kind of how the conversations have been going with some of our counterparts in the U.S. The Premier just did something very similar to this, I think yesterday or the day before, with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Chamber of Commerce, largest association of businesses in the world. They all understand the message. We've been having conversations, like I said earlier, with senators, congresspeople. They all understand the message. It seems to be, truly the senior leadership within the Trump administration and the president himself that are sort of pushing this forward and driving this agenda forward with tariffs. But it's true. When you look at the manufacturing void that's sort of left in the 70s and 80s in the U.S., those people aren't working these jobs anymore, right, Ian? So they don't have that skilled workforce to be able to just turn on the tap and all of a sudden be able to be, manufacturing XYZ widgets. It's just not going to be possible. It's going to take a long time for them to be able to train people up, especially looking at if you've been into a manufacturing facility recently, it's not what it looked like 20 or 30 years ago, right? Everything is driven by computers. There's lean processes. Just walking through most of these facilities, you can eat off the floor,
yeah, it's
right?
Advanced, yeah.
So it's very interesting to hear sort of the dynamic that we're getting from the senior leadership in the president's office versus what you're hearing from sort of the average day American and the folks who represent those constituencies, just like I represent, the constituency here, right? So it's very interesting. I think that message is starting to get through. I don't know if anybody's seen some of the commercials that we ran over the last little while as well. They actually make you want to cry. Like it's pretty amazing the things that we do here in Ontario and how intertwined we are. If I may, just for a minute, the average auto part, this is going back maybe a year or two ago now, crossed the border 9 times before it got installed in a vehicle. Ontario is the largest direct trading partner to 17 U.S. states. We look at Waterloo Region alone. Waterloo Region exports $18 billion worth of goods that are manufactured here in Waterloo Region to the U.S. So your point is very accurate. You can't just say, oh, we're going to onshore all these jobs in the U.S. because you just aren't going to be able to flip that switch, get everything moving. You've got an ability to partner with Ontario, partner with Canada. We're stronger together, and that's the way that we should be looking at things.
Just a last comment, I would say in all of these sessions we've had with the leaders of the parties as we go up the election, I can report that from our board of directors when we have meetings with our committees, with just any of our members, people are angry. They're scared, they're angry, they want to know what's next, but they're angry. And I think the wave of nationalism, I think people are going to be prepared for what is going to be a very difficult period of time, and business is part of that, saying we can't get rolled because if we give in now, it's going to be the first in a long list. So let's move on, to this community is, and as you know, we talked a little bit before this session. The Business Economic Support Team of Waterloo Region, of which the 2 chambers, Communitech, Waterloo EDC, and Explore Waterloo. So the 5 major business organizations have been all talking about this for several years. At the end of COVID and right into now, which is, are we prepared to be a city or a region of a million people? We are 700,000 people now. We're going to be, take your pick, 20, 15, 25, 30 years, doesn't matter. We're going to be a million people or close to it. The question is, are we ready? Are our neighborhoods ready? Are our cities ready? Is our business ready? Is our infrastructure ready? And so a lot of what and we're going to talk about healthcare later on, but I want to start with, obviously this is it's a big contentious issue in Waterloo Region. And one of them is, if we're going to be a million people, that's roughly 300,000 people, roughly speaking, that's 100,000 jobs that are going to be required so that families can buy homes and, pay their grocery bill and do all the things that families need to do. 100,000 jobs. As much as I'm a big supporter, and the Chamber of Commerce is the backbone is small business, it's not all coming from small business. So let's fast forward to what is a very contentious issue, land assembly. And I think the context here is important, notwithstanding what gets written in newspapers or what people say on the news. This has been an issue which has been top of mind for the business community for 12 years. Schneider's left town and took 1,000 jobs, and probably 1,500 with supply chain jobs. And I know for certain, Greg DeRocher and I were talking about saying, how do we let this happen? How do we let one of our largest employers leave? Lots of reasons for it, but we've talked about one of the main things is we did not have a large piece of land assembled to even offer Schneider's. We know subsequent to that we've lost billions of dollars of investment, the next generation of anchor employers that can sustain our community. So I guess, let's talk about land assembly. First principles, the landowners affected, which is it's obviously very personal, that they need to be dealt with fairly, but at the bigger level, where is the next Toyota? And for everyone would know, Toyota has 9,000 jobs here, and if you include Woodstock, it's about 13,000, and there's pretty close to 30,000 jobs that this region relies on in Toyota, between their direct jobs and their supply chain jobs. The process has been contentious, but we need to know that we have land that it can attract that next anchor employee for that next 100,000 jobs. This is not an easy issue, and I understand the emotion behind it, but at a base level, we will not be successful as a community if we don't have jobs.
Yeah, 100%. And listen, first and foremost for me,
making sure that the landowners and affected folks that are, right around the site in Wilmot Township right now, making sure that they're dealt with fairly and openly, and that everyone is putting their best foot forward with negotiations. That's number one for me. I think we can all agree that is something that's very important. But I can tell you, my team and I have knocked almost 10,000 doors over the last 3 weeks. The number one issue that comes up is the economy and job security. And could you imagine this region without a Toyota, right? When you're talking about almost 10,000 jobs, and that's direct jobs. That's not even just the jobs, with we're talking machining, tool and die makers, all the folks from tier 2, tier 3 suppliers that go into feeding that facility. It truly is tens of thousands of jobs. We need to be able to, if you're talking about that Vision 1 million and what's going to happen over the next few years, we need to be able to attract jobs here. We've been talking about this since I've been elected in 2018. I know this has been something that the region has been looking into, that we've got our municipal colleagues here as well. Areas where we can look and identify that growth, right? And this area was identified. It's close to a highway, it's close to power, it's close to water, it's got a contiguous site where you're able to have a large-scale development come in. It makes sense. And if we're talking about, what's going to happen over the future and how we're going to attract those people, or keep them here with good paying jobs, like these are jobs with pensions. These are jobs with great benefits. And we need to make sure that Waterloo Region is poised to be able to see that investment. We've had tens of billions of dollars of investment come into Ontario over the last 7 years. And unfortunately, Waterloo Region just has not been ready to meet it. And I think it's time that we are.
I think it's important that you were elected, and one of the first conversations we had, because I remember meeting with you and Greg and I met with you, is to say, hey, we don't have land assembled. And I think it's really important to say publicly that this is not being driven by the province of Ontario. We have decided that we are going to be 1 million people. And we bought into that. The province under, I think it was McGuinty or Kathleen, but it's been 20 plus years. We agreed to that, and so we have now a responsibility to do the things we need to do to create the business environment and have the anchor employers to create those jobs. So this is, and obviously everything, when we're going to talk about hospitals next, it takes a partnership between the local community and the province, and in some cases the federal government. But this is not being done to us, and I guess the question is, I've heard the other leaders would have said, they really talked about process and said, geez, process is flawed. I was a city councilor 100 years ago. This is the same process that it was then. It was the same process when my dad was on city council in 1972. So is this something that the province should look at and say?
Listen, I think that the initial process maybe didn't go as well as folks would have liked, but I think there's been a much better relationship with the region and the landowners over the last few months. I think they've come to a much better place. Lines of communication are certainly much more open. I think everybody was caught a little bit off guard by the way things were handled at the outset, but I think we're now moving to the point where we're able to have a little bit more of an open dialogue, and I think things are moving along in a much more appropriate manner, if you will, than they were. Like you said, process, is it something we can evaluate later on down the line? Absolutely, just like any other process, So certainly some things to learn, but we need to make sure that the region is ready economically for that Vision 1 million.
Okay, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't then ask about small business, because that is certainly the lifeblood of, we have almost 1,650 members. Probably 80% of them have 20 employees or less. That's the bulk of business.
I used to be one of them.
Yes, you used to be one of them. So you talked a little bit about red tape reduction, but what are the things that for businesses that are struggling, and we know that input costs have gone up, we've inflation, cost of doing business, there's a whole range of things. What are some of the things as you in election campaign mode are saying, how are we going to incent small business, which is the lifeline of every community, to be more successful?
I think one of the things to look at, obviously, is taxation. The Premier's been out there. He's been very adamant and likes to say he's never raised a tax in his 7 years in government, which is amazing. I think there's a lot of things that we can look at, again, from that red tape perspective. I talk a little bit about some of the things our ministry has done and that we look to continue to do, and I think the biggest thing for a lot of folks in this room is paperwork and the unnecessary burden that comes with reporting. I can tell you, as a former small business owner, I'd open up my shop and I'd spend 2 to 3 hours doing paperwork, whether it was complying with WSIB was always the one that took the longest. By the way, we have actually returned WSIB premiums back to businesses, which I think is another thing that you can put on that list. But just that paperwork and the multiple reporting and the filling things out in triplicate and multiple ministries, and then you've got to send it off to no disrespect to our municipal partners, we love you, but as small business owners, sometimes it can be a little challenging to deal with. For me, it was the health department that we dealt with a lot. So being able to look at ways that we can try and streamline things, and then you can reinvest that time back into your business. You can reinvest that money back in your business, or maybe it means, you know what, you don't have to leave as early in the morning so you can get your kids off to school, right? Which I know is something that most parents want to be able to do. And certainly as a small business owner, I was working 14, 16-hour days a lot and didn't get to see my family. So anytime I could cut a little bit of time off where I wasn't having to do those extra things, it all translated into time saved and time back with my family.
Let's pivot to healthcare, and this is we're going to start with that we've been doing family physician recruitment and then partnering with the hospitals on emergency room doctors, and so we're going to talk next series of questions on the new hospital and the merger. But let's start with family physicians. Everyone knows this is a crisis. It's not just a crisis here; it's a crisis across the country. And we know that investors, when they're looking where to invest, so great if we have a land assembled piece of land, but they go and they check, how's your healthcare, how's your education, how's your housing, all of issues that we need to address. But healthcare and availability of particularly primary care, which is the gateway to healthcare, what's the plan for making sure, if not family doctors, whether it's nurse case practitioners, but something that allows families to not be in an emergency room, but to get that gateway to healthcare?
Well, listen, you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about someone who has a family of 5.
Yeah.
I have 5 kids, we're a family of 7, has experienced healthcare in pretty much every way, shape, or form that it exists in this province. And even so to, I won't get too much into it, but with a father-in-law who is in his early 70s, who has Parkinson's and dementia, that we've had to get in, fortunately, into a long-term care facility over the last year as well. So I've seen it right from the bottom all the way to the top. We've got some really great success stories to point to, provincially, obviously, with spinning up new medical schools, something that unfortunately, successive Liberal governments actually cut medical school spots, refused to invest in family doctors, and all of that has come home to roost over the last 10 years. So we're building new medical schools, increasing residency seats, but it can't just be about family doctors, because that has been, I think, the focus for a bit too long at this point. You need to be able to divert folks who don't necessarily need to see a family doctor into other settings. We've done some great things with pharmacy care. I think there's about 17, almost 20 ailments. I think the list is actually going to be growing over the next little while, where you can actually go to a pharmacy and get treated for something like pink eye, rather than having to go maybe, make an appointment. It might take a week to get in and see your family doctor just to get that super simple prescription. Nurse practitioner-led clinics, that's been something I have been a huge champion of here in the region. We've got a great suite of clinics that are led by Leanne Terry here. She does phenomenal work in Kitchener. We just opened a new clinic in Breslau as well, obviously a big growing part of the region. And looking at ways that we can bolster community care in our rural townships. Thank you to Ball Construction. Where did you guys go? There we go. Who helped construct the new Wellesley Recreation Complex. I'm not sure if Joe is still here. Perfect. But we've now got a state-of-the-art community care clinic in Wellesley that is being supported by family docs, that is being supported by nurse practitioners. They're running diabetes clinics. They're running all kinds of community care clinics in there. But there's also a huge outreach component to it as well, where they're going out into communities like Linwood. You've actually got Low German-speaking folks on staff that will go out and support. So there's a lot of really great things that we've done over the last few years, and quite frankly, you know, we're putting our money where our mouth is to say we want to be able to connect every Ontarian with a primary care provider, whether that be a doctor, nurse practitioner, a community care team over the next 4 years. It's something that we want to be able to hang our hat on.
As usual, I'm doing a terrible job of getting us out of here on time, so, but bear with me, we've got about 10 minutes worth of questions, so hold tight. I want to talk about the hospital, and I think this should be a short question, because I know you've been a champion of this, but we've got everyone on.
Yes.
No, I know, no, there's a series of yeses here you can get to. The voluntary merger of the hospital was a huge step for our community. Some of us have been calling for that for 20 years or more. They've gone through this on a voluntary basis. They're, you know, we know it's going to get better patient care, more efficiency, strengthen community health, and we just want to make sure. I know we know the answer, but will the government support? Because I think it's coming in March or April, the final approval.
Yeah, final approvals actually are working their way through the process right now. I was just talking with CEO Ron Gagnon a few weeks ago, just prior to the election, to make sure things were still on track. And as far as I know, things are still pushing along, and we want to see that get done. Okay,
we've not had a new hospital built in 60 years. I think we were somewhere around 300,000 people the last time we built a hospital. We're now 700,000 people. We should have built it 30 years ago and 20 years ago, but since we didn't, today would be a good day to start building that.
Today?
Well, we're going to ask for some more funding. I know we're kind of at the next stage in the planning process. I think it's stage 1.3, phases 1A and 1B. I don't know what that means, but there's, oops, see, we're supposed to be done by now. But I guess the question
is... Does this mean I don't have to answer the question?
No, you do not. You have to answer this question. Yes is the answer to this question. I'll give you a cheat there, but we want to make sure that all of the parties are saying, regardless of what happens, that you're in support of getting this to the next step, because we need to fast track this and get shovels in the ground as quickly as possible.
Well, listen, I think you've seen our commitment already. We've had the Premier here back in the summer, which was the absolute opposite of the day that it was today, because it was sweltering that day.
Yes, it was.
For those of you who remember.
It was.
But, listen, I assume we're going to come back early March to the legislature and very likely introduce a budget. Do I want to see it in there? Absolutely. We want to see things moving to stage, I believe it's 1.3. I'm in constant contact with our hospital partners, constant contact with the Ministry of Health to try and advance this forward. This is something that I want to be able to look back on when I'm as old as you, Ian, and say that this is what happens when you don't get us out of here on time. No, but in all seriousness, to look back and say, listen, I was part of that. I was part of helping get this new hospital built. I think as someone who, represents a community, it's truly something that I want to be able to look back on and say, I had a small piece of helping to get that done.
Well, that's great to hear. I think one of the reasons we want to keep asking about this is, and I recognize this issue of healthcare infrastructure, of hospitals, is right across the province. And I think there's something in the order of 50
projects.
50 projects on the go. And the importance of asking this is to say, we can't be the engine of economic growth along the Toronto Waterloo corridor if we don't have the healthcare infrastructure that our community needs. And that's why there's lots of priorities. This has to be a top priority. Okay, listen, I'm going to not speed through this, but we've talked about, many times we've talked about housing. We're going to go to 1 million. There's got to be all kinds, whether ground-oriented, multi-res, infill, a missing middle, take your pick. There's challenges around the cost of housing, affordability, accessibility, the supply we need to get up, and there's all kinds of things. Development charges, fees, the permit fees. Do we have the skilled labor? What's the plan for the government to not just for us? Again, this is another one of those things that faces every community. What's the plan to make sure we get rid of regulation, that we try and address the cost, which in some cases, I think Barry said this morning, here it might be 100 or 120,000 in fees to build a new home. It could be 300,000.
Yeah, I've heard up to somewhere around just when you total all the fees in general that get passed along to the end buyer, somewhere into the neighborhood of $160,000.
So
substantial.
what's the plan to make sure, because the private sector's got to build them, but we need more supply if we're going to drive down costs and create more affordability.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of steps that have been taken. I know personally, working with all of our municipal leaders that are in the room here, we've been looking to identify ways through different roundtables, through different conversations we've had one-on-one with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Minister Calandra. I think he's done a phenomenal job of being able to help our area municipalities certainly build infrastructure. Mayor McCabe and I were on the phone the other day talking about some good infrastructure stuff that's coming down the proverbial pipe, pardon the pun. But when it comes to permitting, when it comes to the province having a bigger role in helping to create infrastructure, especially some of those large-scale, we'll say more urbanized infrastructure projects, but of course for our rural partners, it could be something very simple. It could be roads and bridges. It could be opening up access to certain areas of a community that didn't have access beforehand, or that might be, you're talking about wastewater capacity is a huge one, certainly in our rural townships. So I think we've got to do more. I think there's a lot that's been done. We've committed to putting another $1 billion into two different funds that will cover large-scale infrastructure projects that municipalities are looking to put forward. They're application-based processes that we then take in, we evaluate, see how many houses versus dollars are going to be kind of leveraged off of that. And there's definitely a lot more to do, but I think, when you look at the permitting process, being able to streamline that, getting more permits out the door, of course, making sure that we have land ready and available when builders are ready to build, and making sure that we're able to help those municipalities certainly get that infrastructure in the ground. That's been the number one thing that we've heard as a government that's going to be able to help build homes.
So connected to housing, there's no chance of us building the 70,000 homes we need here. So we'll leave aside those things if we don't finish the LRT. LRT has been an undeniable success. I think it's over $5 billion in investment. Is it along the corridor? Seven or eight?
Eight. Chair Redmond, 8.
I'm behind the times because I'm old and I can't read anymore, Mike, but...
You said it.
Shut it. But we know investment came. The LRT has to be finished. There's no way we'll be able to build the homes we need until we connect it to South Cambridge. And I was, when the Premier was here, I'd say, Premier, are you committed to? Because we put a third, our taxpayers put in a third of the cost. Most of the other, whether it's Hamilton or other places, are 50-50 between the feds and the province, or certainly there's no local contribution on property tax owners. And I guess the commitment, I think you're supportive of it, but will you take that message back to the Premier that we need that done and fully funded as quickly as possible?
Yeah, we're on the largest infrastructure build in North American history right now when it comes to public transit. We are doing momentous things. There is subways being created all across Toronto that should have been done 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. We're looking at ways that we can get different LRT projects, say with Ottawa Transpo, that's been the last one that we've sort of been dealing with, where the province is actually going to upload their LRT, should we be re-elected, upload their LRT under the provincial framework with Metrolinx, because it has had so many problems. The LRT here, it's been a great success. My kids ride it to school most days. They take public transit down Victoria Street and then hop on the LRT up to KCI. So it's certainly something that I've been able to see the benefit of. It was a little challenging through some of the construction, I will say, as a small business owner in Uptown Waterloo. We won't get into that too much today. But I like to think I kind of came out of the other side better, and I think the community has as well. But we're actively evaluating all of the different transit projects. When we look at what's done, certainly with the King Victoria Transit Hub, which we've been working in concert with Metrolinx and the region, and then also the investments that we've seen in Go Transit. I know we haven't talked about it much. I don't know if we're going to have time to, but there's been a lot of really good things in regards to public transit in the region being able to move people around.
Well, that's going to be the last call. I got two quick questions, but a quick answer and all day two-way go. And to the government's credit, And I remember doing this from my basement on a Zoom announcement, that the announcement of $1.2 billion for the expansion of GO service for the infrastructure. Julie Garner, our friend from North Guide, was working with our coalition. So congratulations on that. And we've made most of those investments. The problem is that the service has not picked up. And I think that's what you're hearing from business. Sure. And not just students on weekends that can't get back and forth. We need those express trains and those things. What's the plan?
So there's a few different pieces that kind of go along with this. Number one, ridership has changed considerably since the pandemic. It's not just your sort of everyday commuter, 9-to-5 commuter anymore. Folks are looking to take advantage of being able to take the train into Toronto and the GTA, or vice versa, at really all different times a day now. When we had first initially negotiated with CN Rail, who owns about a 30-kilometer stretch of track kind of between sort of Georgetown and Brampton, or around Georgetown essentially, it was predicated off of those times. So we're going back, we're renegotiating with CN, we're trying to figure out how we can, have that balance of moving goods to market, which is extremely important, of course, with freight, but also making sure that we can move people back and forth to, quite frankly, make those goods that go to market, or to our schools, our post-secondary education institutions. While that's happening, we've made substantial investments in double tracking, getting ready for electrification, level crossings. So those would be crossings that don't go up or under, where you actually have, vehicles crossing the train tracks to make things more safe. We've increased the speed of the train considerably. We've been able to lower that time, that frequency, or the time it takes to get from point A to point B. But, we've heard loud and clear, weekend train, that's a big one. That's a really big one. People want to be able to get in and see family, vice versa. They want to go to a Jays game. They want to go to a show. They want to be able to take advantage of, dare I say, maybe having a pop or two at a local establishment, and not having to worry about driving home. So I think there's a lot of good things to come. Stay tuned on that. And you know what? I'm going to dovetail that with Highway 7.
Okay.
We're gonna see some movement in short order on Highway 7. We've got through Phase 1, Phase 2. The contract, unfortunately for Frederick Street Bridge, had to be re-tendered. The company that had won it wasn't going to be able to initially make their obligations on the project, so we unfortunately had to go out and re-tender it. But that's now been awarded, and we're ready. There's a lot of great work, design work, that's being done on the bridges, the twinning over the Grand River that will happen just behind us. And we've committed to it. It's in the budget, and it's been something that we've been talking about for the better part of, we're not getting into ages anymore.
No, we're not getting into
even before your time.
I can tell you from your lips to God's ears, because I've read chamber minutes of board meetings dating back 60 years ago, where 60 years ago they started talking about a better connection between I'm not kidding you. They 60 years it's back in the minutes. Listen, last question, and this would have been directed to the Premier. Elections by their very nature are very public job interviews. You're going through yours locally here in Kitchener-Conestoga, but I would ask to the Premier, if he was here, why would you believe that he's the best person to be the next Premier of Province Ontario?
Yeah, listen,
2 minutes max.
2 minutes max. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in him being the leader, the best leader that we could have to get us through what's happening with the United States, to be there, to be able to continue on these huge momentous infrastructure builds that we have. He's the right person at the right time. I think we've seen it at the doors. Our team has been out. We've knocked, I think we're in the neighborhood of about 8,500. We'll probably hit about 10,000 doors, weather dependent. We'll see what happens by the end of this week. And it has been a resounding vote of support for Doug Ford, for the Ontario PC Party. We've seen him doing the job that he needs to do out there, leading the province, still being during an election campaign right now in Washington, D.C. to make sure that we are able to protect Ontario. So I'll close it off with that. I want to say thank you very much for inviting me here. I want to say thank you all for putting up with me for the last hour. I know you were very excited to see the Premier, but I think we've had a great conversation, and happy to do this anytime.
Well, thank you to Mike for making yourself available. I know it's, and we kept this on, and I'm pleased that you took out time out of your schedule, along with the other leaders. Important for us as a community to understand the different parties, their different viewpoints, and what it means for us in our communities and our businesses here. So just hang tight. We're going to just wrap up. Thanks so much to all of you for being here today, and once again to our sponsors, our title sponsor, Manulife, our silver sponsor, Activa, bronze sponsor, the Christian Labour Association of Canada, and Cornerstone Association of Realtors. Our community partners are friends of the Grand Valley Construction Association, North Guide, and Waterloo Region Home Builders Association. Our production sponsor today is our friends at Goodco Productions, and to our hosts here at Bingham. And of course, a special thanks to all of you attending in person today, braving the weather, and for those of you that joined us on the live stream, for your continued support in making these events possible. Hope you have a great afternoon, and be safe. Good job there.